Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the story, everyone. Manhattan, New York, the Pinnacle Tower. Sarah Lopez never imagined that a simple noise complaint at 2 a.m. would result in the most humiliating and paradoxically liberating moment of her life. Enough, she shouted, pounding her fist against the reinforced penthouse door. You think you can throw parties every single night just because you have money? Electronic music pulsed through the mahogany, drowning out her protests. Sarah worked double shifts, graphic designer by day, freelance illustrator by night, and she needed those precious few hours of sleep desperately. When the door finally swung open, revealing a tall man with tousled dark hair and amber-colored eyes that seemed to appraise her net worth in real time, Sarah completely lost her composure. "Oh, it's you," he said, leaning against the doorframe with an arrogance that made Sarah's blood boil. The uptight neighbor from 15. Uptight? Sarah laughed, but there was zero humor in the sound. Uptight? Listen here, penthouse prince. Actually, it's more like penthouse king, he interrupted, flashing that smile that probably melted other women, but only infuriated Sarah further. Whatever. King, prince, or galactic emperor, I don't care. Her voice echoed down the hallway, probably waking half the floor. You are a spoiled, arrogant, selfish brat who thinks the world revolves around you. A small crowd began to gather. Neighbors in pajamas, building staff, even the building manager appeared. You know what your problem is? Sarah continued, jabbing her finger toward his chest. You've never heard the word no in your entire life. I bet your parents handed you everything on a silver platter, that you've never worked a single day, that you're one of those trust fund babies who buys people like you buy coffee. His smile faltered for just a second, so quickly Sarah almost missed it. And you know what else? Money doesn't buy manners. It doesn't buy consideration. And it definitely doesn't buy you the right to make everyone else's life miserable. Damn, whispered Mrs. Garcia from 12. She went there, so Sarah concluded, breathless. Keep your music at a human volume after 10 p.m., or I will make your life extremely difficult. And trust me, I'm very creative when I'm angry. Dead silence. Even the music had stopped. The man studied her for a long moment, those amber eyes examining her face like he was memorizing every detail. Interesting, he murmured finally. Very interesting. And then, to everyone's complete shock, he smiled, not that practiced, charming smile, but something genuine and almost delighted. What's your name, firecracker? Sarah blinked, thrown off by the sudden shift. What? Your name? I think I should know the name of the woman who just verbally eviscerated me in front of half the building. Sarah, she said automatically, then immediately regretted it. But that doesn't mean... Well, Sarah, he said, extending his hand like they were at some fancy cocktail party, instead of standing in a hallway at 2 a.m., with her in coffee-stained pajamas. I don't care who you are, Sarah cut him off, ignoring his outstretched hand. Just keep it down. She turned on her heel and marched back to the elevator, leaving behind a stunned crowd and one very intrigued billionaire heir who had just experienced something he'd never encountered before, someone who genuinely didn't give a care about his money or status. As the elevator doors closed, Sarah caught a glimpse of him still standing in his doorway, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. She had no idea that the man she'd just publicly humiliated was Ethan Stonewell, heir to the Stonewell Enterprises empire, one of the most powerful families in America, and she definitely had no idea that her little outburst had just made her the most interesting person Ethan had met in his entire privileged life. The game, as they say, was about to begin. Manhattan, New York, Stonewell Enterprises headquarters. Ethan Stonewell had never been called a spoiled brat to his face. In his 28 years of existence, people had whispered behind his back, trust fund baby, silver spoon prince, corporate heir, but no one had ever had the audacity to say it directly to him until last night. He sat in his corner office on the 52nd floor of the Stonewell Tower, supposedly reviewing quarterly reports, but his mind kept drifting to a pair of furious dark eyes and coffee-stained pajamas. Sir, his assistant James knocked on the glass door. Your 10 is here. Cancel it, Ethan said, without looking up from his computer screen. Actually, cancel everything until noon. James raised an eyebrow but nodded. Of course, sir. Is there anything else you need? Information, Ethan said, finally turning his chair around. I need you to find out everything you can about someone. Industrial espionage, sir? James asked, pulling out his tablet with practiced efficiency. Personal reconnaissance? Ethan leaned back in his leather chair. Sarah Lopez lives in apartment 15B at the Pinnacle Tower. I want to know where she works, what she does, her background, everything. James paused mid-type. Sir, if I may ask, you may not. Ethan's tone was final, but there was an amused glint in his eyes. Just get me the information. Within 2 hours, James had compiled a comprehensive file that would have made the FBI proud. Ethan reviewed it with growing interest and something that felt suspiciously like respect. Sarah Elena Lopez, 26, born in Houston, Texas, to immigrant parents who owned a small restaurant, full scholarship to Parsons School of Design. Graduated summa cum laude. No trust fund, no family money. Everything she had, she'd earned herself. She worked at Carter and Associates, a mid-tier design firm in Soho, but her real passion was her freelance illustration work. Her portfolio, which James had somehow managed to access, was extraordinary, vibrant, emotional, authentic, in a way that most art in Ethan's world wasn't. She lived paycheck to paycheck, had student loans, and worked 60-hour weeks to afford her tiny one-bedroom apartment in his building, the same building where his penthouse cost more per month than she made in a year. Fascinating, he murmured to himself, studying a particular illustration, a street scene in what looked like her old neighborhood in Houston, full of life and warmth and struggle. His phone buzzed, a text from his mother. Don't forget tonight's gala. The Harrington girl will be there. Ah, yes. The carefully orchestrated social scene, another perfectly polished heiress, another strategic alliance disguised as romance, another woman who would agree with everything he said and laugh at all his jokes regardless of whether they were funny. Unlike a certain firecracker who had called him a spoiled brat, Ethan made a decision that would have shocked his board of directors and probably given his mother a mild heart attack. James, he called out, clear my schedule for tonight. But sir, the Children's Hospital Gala send a donation. A big one. Ethan was already gathering his things. I have more important business to attend to. Meanwhile, at Carter and Associates, Sarah was having the worst day of her professional life, which was saying something considering she once had to redesign an entire campaign because the client decided they hated the color blue. Lopez, her boss, Michael Carter, bellowed across the open office conference room. She grabbed her coffee, her 4th cup of the day, and hurried to the glass-walled conference room where Michael waited with crossed arms and a scowl that could curdle milk. Care to explain this? He slid a tablet across the table. On the screen was her latest project, a campaign for a local nonprofit. It was good work, some of her best, actually, but Michael's expression suggested she'd personally insulted his mother. What seems to be the problem? Sarah asked, genuinely confused. The problem, Michael said, his voice dripping with condescension, is that you went completely off script. The client wanted safe, corporate, boring. Instead, you gave them this emotional manipulation. Sarah bristled. It's called authentic storytelling, Michael. The nonprofit helps homeless veterans. I thought showing their humanity, rather than treating them like statistics, might be more effective. You thought wrong. Michael leaned back in his chair. The client is reconsidering their contract. They want something more traditional. Traditional meaning soulless. Traditional meaning professional. Michael's tone was final. Reduit. Make it corporate friendly. And Sarah, next time, stick to the brief. As Sarah walked back to her desk, her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend and roommate, Emily. Bad day? You look like you want to murder someone. Sarah glanced up to see Emily grinning at her from across the office. Emily worked in accounting but had an uncanny ability to read Sarah's moods from 50 feet away. Worse, Sarah texted back, I might actually be losing my creative soul. Coffee later? I have gossip that might cheer you up. Define gossip. Remember your penthouse prints from last night? I did some digging. Sarah's heart did something weird in her chest. She told herself it was dread, not curiosity. Don't care. She lied. Sure you don't. Meet me at Joe's at 6. And Sarah, you might want to sit down for this one. The rest of the afternoon crawled by like a wounded snail. Every time Sarah tried to focus on making her heartfelt campaign more corporate friendly, her mind wandered to amber-colored eyes and that infuriating smile. At exactly 5:47 p.m., she was out the door and practically sprinting to Joe's Coffee, the little cafe 2 blocks away where she and Emily had been meeting for emergency gossip sessions since they'd moved to New York 3 years ago. Emily was already there, practically bouncing in her seat with barely contained excitement. Okay, Sarah said, sliding into the booth across from her. Hit me with it. Emily leaned forward conspiratorially. Your penthouse prince. His name is Ethan Stonewell. Sarah shrugged. So, rich guy with a rich guy name. Shocking. Sarah, Emily's eyes were wide. Stonewell, as in Stonewell Enterprises, as in one of the biggest companies in America, as in his family is worth about $12 billion. The coffee cup slipped from Sarah's fingers, clattering against the saucer. 12 billion with a B. Emily pulled out her phone, showing Sarah a Forbes article. He's not just rich, babe. He's American royalty, and you called him a spoiled brat in front of half your building. Sarah stared at the photo on the screen, a professional headshot that somehow made those amber eyes look even more intense. Oh no, she whispered. Oh no, oh no, oh no. Oh yes, Emily said cheerfully. You basically told one of the most powerful men in the country that money can't buy manners. I'm honestly impressed you're still alive. Sarah buried her face in her hands. He's going to have me evicted or arrested or both. Or, Emily said thoughtfully, he's going to be intrigued. Think about it. When was the last time someone talked to him like he was just a regular person? Emily, this isn't a romantic comedy. This is my life, and I just made an enemy of someone who could buy and sell my entire existence without breaking a sweat. But even as she said it, Sarah couldn't shake the memory of how his smile had changed in that last moment, from practiced charm to something that looked almost genuine. What she didn't know was that at that very moment, Ethan Stonewell was sitting in his Maserati outside her building, debating whether to go upstairs and apologize for his behavior. What she really didn't know was that he'd already decided that Sarah Lopez was the most refreshing thing to happen to him in years. And what she absolutely couldn't have imagined was that her little outburst had started something that would change both of their lives forever. Sarah arrived at work the next morning with dark circles under her eyes and the kind of nervous energy that came from staying up all night catastrophizing. She'd barely slept, her mind spinning with worst-case scenarios involving eviction notices and mysterious accidents. She was so distracted that she almost walked straight into the massive flower arrangement sitting on her desk. What the? Sarah stopped short, staring at the elaborate bouquet of white roses and peonies that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget. Someone's got a secret admirer, Emily sang from the next cubicle over, but her voice carried a note of concern. Those came by courier about 20 minutes ago. Very fancy courier. Sarah's stomach dropped. She reached for the small white card nestled among the flowers with trembling fingers. Ms. Lopez, I believe we got off on the wrong foot. Would you join me for coffee this afternoon to discuss our neighborly relations? 3 p.m. at Café Luna. E. Stonewell. P.S. I promise to keep my voice at an appropriate volume. Oh, this is bad, Sarah whispered, sinking into her chair. This is very, very bad. What does it say? Emily was practically climbing over the cubicle divider. Sarah showed her the card. Emily's eyes widened. Okay, maybe it's not that bad. I mean, he's asking for coffee, not sending lawyers. Emily. Billionaire don't ask people for coffee. They summon them. This is a summons disguised as an invitation. Sarah was spiraling, and she knew it, but couldn't seem to stop. He probably wants to humiliate me in public before he destroys my life. Or, Michael Carter's voice cut through her panic, he wants to discuss business. Both women turned to see their boss standing behind them, eyeing the flowers with poorly concealed interest. Mr. Carter, Sarah started, but he held up a hand. Lopez, my office, now. This was becoming a very unwelcome pattern. In the conference room, Michael sat across from her with the expression of a shark who'd just smelled blood in the water. So, he began, steepling his fingers. Care to explain how you know Ethan Stonewell? We're neighbors. It wasn't technically a lie. Neighbors. Michael's eyebrows shot up. You're neighbors with the heir to a $1-2 billion fortune. It's not like we're friends or anything, Sarah said quickly. We just live in the same building, right? Michael clearly didn't believe her, but his expression shifted from suspicious to calculating. Well, since you two are so neighborly, perhaps you could put in a good word for our firm. Stonewell Enterprises has been looking for a new creative agency. Sarah's heart sank. Of course, everything always came back to money and connections. I don't think. Think about it. Lopez, a contract with Stonewell could set this firm up for years. Could set you up for years. Michael leaned forward. I'm sure, Mr. Back, Stonewell would be very appreciative of any help you could provide. The implication hung heavy in the air. Sarah felt sick. I'll think about it, she managed. Good girl. And Lopez, don't keep him waiting. Café Luna, 3. Sarah stood outside the trendy cafe in Soho, trying to work up the courage to go inside. She'd changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on a simple black dress that was professional enough for a business meeting, but casual enough to not look like she was trying too hard. She was trying very hard. Through the large windows, she could see him sitting at a corner table, scrolling through his phone. He looked different in the afternoon. Light still devastatingly handsome, but somehow more human. Less like the arrogant prince from the penthouse, and more like a regular guy waiting for coffee. A regular guy who could buy Manhattan if he felt like it. Sarah took a deep breath and pushed through the door. Ethan looked up as she approached, and that smile, the genuine one from the other night, spread across his face. "You came," he said, standing to pull out her chair. "I wasn't sure you would." "Honestly, I wasn't sure either," Sarah admitted, settling into her seat. "But curiosity killed the cat. And apparently I'm the cat in this scenario. Coffee?" Ethan gestured toward the barista. "Please." Large, strong, possibly intravenous. He laughed, actually laughed, and Sarah felt some of her tension ease. Maybe this wouldn't be a complete disaster. "So," she said once they both had their drinks, "what's this about? Are you here to demand an apology? Sue me for emotional distress? Have me arrested for disturbing the peace?" "Actually," Ethan said, leaning back in his chair, "I wanted to thank you." Sarah blinked. "I'm sorry, what?" "Thank you. For the other night." His expression grew serious. "Do you know how long it's been since someone spoke to me like that? Like I was just a person. Like you were a jerk, you mean? Like I was a real person who could be held accountable for his actions," Ethan corrected. "Most people either treat me like I'm some kind of god who can do no wrong, or they're so intimidated they can barely speak. You called me out on my behavior. It was refreshing." Sarah stared at him. "You're joking." "I'm not." Ethan leaned forward, those amber eyes intent on her face. "Tell me something, Sarah. What do you know about my family's business?" "Honestly, just what Emily Googled yesterday. Something about real estate and technology, and being obscenely wealthy. Real estate, technology, media, hospitality. We have our fingers in a lot of pies." Ethan paused. "But what we don't have is authenticity. Everything we touch becomes polished and corporate and soulless." The word hit Sarah like a physical blow. It was exactly what she'd said about her own work just yesterday. "I've been looking at your portfolio," Ethan continued. "Your real work, not the corporate campaigns. It's incredible, Sarah. It has something that all the money in the world can't buy." "Heart, how did you?" Sarah started, then shook her head. "Never mind. Billionaire resources. I get it. I have a proposition for you." And there it was. The real reason for this meeting. "Let me guess," Sarah said, her defensive walls shooting back up. "You want to hire me to make your company look more authentic? Add some heart to your soulless empire?" "No," Ethan said quietly. "I want you to teach me." "Teach you what?" "How to be real. How to connect with people without a net worth calculation involved. How to, I don't know, have an actual conversation without it being a business transaction." Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Are you serious right now? You want me to give you lessons in being human?" "I know how it sounds," Ethan said quickly. "But think about it. When was the last time you met someone who grew up in my world who wasn't completely disconnected from reality? I've been surrounded by yes-men and social climbers my entire life. I don't know how to talk to someone who doesn't want something from me. What makes you think I don't want something from you?" Ethan smiled that genuine smile again. "Because you've made it very clear that you think I'm a spoiled brat who doesn't deserve the air he breathes." "Well, when you put it like that." "Look," Ethan said, setting down his coffee cup and fixing her with a direct stare that made her stomach flutter in ways she absolutely did not want to analyze. "I'm not asking you to like me. I'm asking you to help me become someone worth liking." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, studying his face for any sign of manipulation or ulterior motive. All she saw was something that looked suspiciously like vulnerability. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Spend time with me. Show me your world. Teach me what it's like to work for something, to struggle for something, to care about something other than profit margins and stock prices." Ethan paused. "In exchange, I'll help you with whatever you need, career advice, connections, funding for your art, whatever you want. And if I say no, then you say no. I'll respect your decision. Move out of the penthouse if it makes you more comfortable." And we'll pretend this conversation never happened. Sarah's mind raced. This was insane. The whole situation was completely ridiculous. But there was something in his voice, something genuine, that made her believe he was serious. And honestly, what did she have to lose? Her career was stagnating. Her boss was a nightmare. And she was barely making rent. Maybe this was her chance to finally get ahead. Or maybe this was exactly how young women disappeared in true crime documentaries. "How do I know this isn't some elaborate game to you?" she asked. Rich guy decides to slum it with the poor girl for entertainment. Ethan was quiet for a moment, then pulled out his phone and showed her a photo. A magazine spread of him at some charity gala, surrounded by beautiful women in expensive gowns. Everyone smiling perfect, empty smiles. "Does this look like entertainment to you?" he asked. "This is my life, Sarah. Every day, every event, every conversation, it's all performance all the time. I don't even remember who I am, underneath all the expectations and obligations." Sarah looked at the photo, then at him. In the magazine, he looked like a perfect prince. Sitting across from her now, he just looked tired. 2 weeks, she heard herself saying. Trial period. You want to learn about the real world? Fine. But we do this my way. On my terms. No special treatment, no shortcuts, no throwing money at problems. Ethan's face lit up like she'd just handed him the keys to the kingdom. "Deal," he said immediately, extending his hand across the table. Sarah looked at his offered hand for a moment, then shook it, trying to ignore the way her skin tingled at the contact. "Deal. But Ethan, if you hurt my friends, embarrass me publicly, or turn this into some kind of social media spectacle, I will make that little speech in the hallway look like a love letter. Understood?" Understood. His smile was pure mischief now. "So, teacher, where do we start?" As Sarah looked at him, really looked at him, she had the distinct feeling that she'd just agreed to something that would change everything. She just hoped it wouldn't destroy her in the process. Absolutely not. Sarah stood in the lobby of the Pinnacle Tower at 7 a.m. sharp, staring at what could only be described as a mobile Forbes cover shoot. Ethan emerged from the elevator, wearing a perfectly tailored charcoal suit that probably cost more than her car, hairstyled to perfection, looking like he was ready to close a billion-dollar deal, not learn about real life. "What's wrong with what I'm wearing?" Ethan asked, genuinely confused as he adjusted his platinum cufflinks. "Everything?" Sarah crossed her arms. Lesson 1. Real people don't wear $1,000 suits to go grocery shopping. We're going grocery shopping? We're going grocery shopping. But first, we're going shopping. Shopping. She gestured toward his outfit. "You look like you're about to foreclose on someone's house. We need to fix that." Ethan glanced down at his attire. "This is Tom Ford. It's a very good suit." "I'm sure it is. It's also screaming, 'I have more money than sense' to everyone within a 5-block radius." Sarah started walking toward the door. "Come on, we're going to Target." "Target?" Ethan said the word like she'd suggested they visit Mars. "Target? You know, the red bullseye store where normal people buy normal clothes at normal prices." The ride to Target in Ethan's Maserati was an experience in itself. Sarah had insisted on driving. Real people don't have chauffeurs, which meant Ethan spent the entire journey gripping the door handle and making small sounds of distress every time she changed lanes. "You drive very aggressively," he managed as she parallel parked between a Honda Civic and a pickup truck. "I drive normally. You're just used to James doing everything for you." Sarah unbuckled her seatbelt and turned to face him. "Speaking of which, no calling James today, no credit cards with no limits. No, my assistant will handle it. Today, you're just Ethan, regular guy with a regular budget." She handed him a prepaid debit card with exactly $200 on it. "This is my budget for an entire day." Ethan stared at the card like it might bite him. "This is your budget for the entire week?" "Welcome to reality, Prince." Inside Target, Ethan looked around with the wide-eyed wonder of an anthropologist discovering a new civilization. He picked up a package of white cotton t-shirts and examined the price tag with genuine fascination. 3 shirts for $12, he murmured. "That's $4 per shirt." "Math skills are impressive," Sarah said dryly, tossing a pack of jeans into their cart. "Try these on. Size 32. X. 34. How did you?" "I have eyes. And you're not the first tall, lean guy I've had to shop for." She paused, realizing how that sounded. "My brother," she clarified quickly. Back in Texas, 20 minutes later, Ethan emerged from the fitting room looking normal. The jeans fit him perfectly, and the simple navy Henley shirt clung to his frame in a way that made Sarah forget how to breathe for a moment. "How do I look?" he asked, running his hands down the unfamiliar fabric. "Like a real person," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "We'll take 2 pairs of jeans, 4 shirts," and she grabbed a clearance rack hoodie. "It's gray," Ethan said, holding up the hoodie like it had personally offended him. "It's practical, and it was $15. In your world, that's lunch money. In my world, that's 3 meals." They spent the next hour wandering through Target, with Sarah providing running commentary on the economics of everyday life. Ethan listened with the intense focus of someone trying to learn a foreign language, asking questions that ranged from insightful to absurd. "Why don't they organize the produce by color?" he asked in the grocery section. "Because that's not how people shop for food. You don't think, 'I need something red for dinner.' You think, 'I need tomatoes for pasta sauce.' But wouldn't it be more aesthetically pleasing?" "Ethan, this isn't a photo shoot. It's a grocery store. Function over form." They were in the cereal aisle when disaster struck. Ethan reached for a box of organic artisanal granola that cost $18. "No," Sarah said firmly, taking the box from his hands and replacing it with a bag of store-brand cereal. "This is $4 and has the same nutritional value, but the other one is organic, and this one won't require you to take out a small loan." She held up the generic bag. Real-world lesson number 2. Brand names are often just expensive packaging around the same basic product. Ethan stared at the store-brand cereal, like it was a puzzle he couldn't solve. "But how do you know it's good quality?" "You read the ingredients, check the nutrition facts, and sometimes you just have to trust that not everything cheap is garbage." Sarah softened her tone slightly. "Look, I'm not saying expensive things are never worth it, but most of the time, you're paying for the label, not the product." They made it through checkout without any major incidents, though Ethan did seem genuinely shocked when their total came to $63. "Sushati, that's it?" he asked as Sarah handed him the receipt. "For all of this? That's it. You just bought a week's worth of clothes and food for less than you probably spend on a single lunch." Ethan studied the receipt like it contained the secrets of the universe. "I spent $200 on lunch yesterday." "Of course you did." Sarah shook her head. "Come on, the real education is just beginning." Their next stop was the subway, which proved to be an adventure in itself. Ethan had clearly never used public transportation, and Sarah watched with barely concealed amusement as he tried to figure out the MetroCard machine. "It's not accepting my card," he said, frustration creeping into his voice. "Because you're trying to use a black Amex, it takes cash or debit." Sarah stepped in and bought their cards. "And you have to swipe it fast, but not too fast. And if it doesn't work the first time, you wait 3 seconds and try again. This seems unnecessarily complicated. Welcome to how the other 99% lives." The subway ride to Brooklyn was an education in itself. Ethan sat rigidly upright, clearly uncomfortable with the proximity of strangers, the sounds, the smells, the general chaos of rush-hour public transportation. "Relax," Sarah murmured, as a group of teenagers laughed loudly across the car. "They're just kids being kids, not a threat to your existence." I know that intellectually, Ethan's knuckles were white where he gripped the pole, but I've never been in a confined space with this many people who aren't on my payroll. Sarah felt a pang of something that might have been sympathy. "It's overwhelming at first, but look around, really look. These are just people living their lives, going to work, visiting family, running errands. Same as you, different circumstances." Ethan did look, and gradually his posture relaxed. By the time they reached their stop, he was actually observing the other passengers with genuine curiosity rather than barely concealed terror. "Where are we going?" he asked as they emerged from the subway station into the bright Brooklyn morning. "My old neighborhood. I want to show you where I grew up." They walked through the streets of Sunset Park, past bodegas and laundromats, past small restaurants and community gardens. Ethan looked around with the same wonder he'd shown in Target, but this time there was something deeper in his expression. "It's so," he started, then stopped. "Poor," Sarah supplied, a defensive edge to her voice. "Alive," Ethan said quietly. "There's so much life here, energy, people actually talking to each other on the street." They stopped in front of a small community center where a group of kids were playing basketball in the outdoor court. The sound of bouncing balls and shouting filled the air, mixed with music from someone's speaker and the general hum of urban life. "I used to come here after school," Sarah said, leaning against the fence. "When my parents were working late at the restaurant, Mrs. Wong, no relation, ran the after-school program. She's the one who first encouraged me to draw. Is she still here? She retired last year, but she still volunteers. Sarah smiled at the memory. She used to say that everyone has a gift, but not everyone gets the chance to unwrap it. She made sure I got my chance. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, watching the kids play. I had tutors, he said finally. Piano lessons, tennis lessons, sailing lessons, everything carefully scheduled and supervised. I don't think I ever just played. That's sad. I didn't think so at the time. I thought that was just how life worked. He turned to look at her. When did you know you wanted to be an artist? I was 8. My mom was working double shifts, and I was stuck at home with the flu. All I had was a box of crayons and some computer paper my dad had brought home from his office job. Sarah's eyes grew distant. I drew our apartment, but the way I wanted it to look, with big windows and bright colors and space for my mom to paint her nails without sitting on the kitchen counter. Do you still have it? The drawing? No. But I have this. She pulled out her phone and showed him her lock screen. A photo of a small, neat apartment with bright yellow walls and potted plants on every surface. My mom's apartment now. She finally got those big windows. Ethan studied the photo. You did that? Bought her the apartment? Decorated it? Actually, she saved up for years to move out of our old place. I just made sure it looked like the home she always dreamed of. Sarah put her phone away. That's what art is supposed to do. I think make things better, more beautiful, more hopeful. Is that why you were so angry about the corporate campaign? Sarah glanced at him, surprised. You really were paying attention to my work. I told you, it has something mine doesn't, something I want to understand. They started walking again, past more shops and cafes, each one telling a story of immigrant families and community struggles and small victories. Ethan asked questions about everything. Why there were so many small restaurants instead of chain stores, how the community garden worked, what the murals on the walls meant. Everything here has a story, he observed, as they passed a bodega with hand-painted signs in 3 languages. That's what happens when people actually live somewhere, instead of just existing there, Sarah said. When your survival depends on community, instead of stock portfolios. They stopped for lunch at a small Dominican restaurant that Sarah remembered from her childhood. The owner, a round woman named Rosa, greeted Sarah with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for returning war heroes. Mija, you brought a friend. Rosa's eyes immediately went to Ethan, sizing him up with the practiced eye of someone who had raised 5 children and could spot trouble from 3 blocks away. This is Ethan, Sarah said. Ethan, this is Rosa, best Paulo in Brooklyn. Sit. Sit. Rosa ushered them to a small table near the window. I'll bring you the good stuff. The good stuff turned out to be enough food for a small army. Slow roasted pork, rice and beans, sweet plantains, and yuca with garlic sauce. Ethan stared at the spread with something approaching awe. This is incredible, he said after his first bite. How much does a meal like this cost? $12, Sarah said. Each. Ethan nearly choked on his rice. $12? I've paid 50 times that for dinner. Did it taste 50 times better? Honestly, no. Not even close. Rosa returned with café con leche and a maternal gleam in her eye. You take care of this one, she told Ethan, patting Sarah's shoulder. She's special. This girl works too hard, doesn't eat enough, but she has a good heart. I can see that, Ethan said, and the sincerity in his voice made Sarah's stomach flip. After lunch, they walked to Prospect Park, where Sarah spread out a blanket she'd bought at Target earlier, and they sat under a tree watching people play frisbee and walk their dogs. Tell me about your family, Ethan said, lying back on the blanket and closing his eyes against the afternoon sun. What do you want to know? Everything. What they're like, what they do, why they matter to you. Sarah settled back beside him, careful to maintain a respectable distance. My dad works construction now, but he used to be an accountant back in El Salvador. My mom cleans offices during the day and takes online classes at night. She's getting her GED in English. They've been married 28 years and still hold hands when they watch TV. They sound wonderful. They are. They gave up everything so I could have opportunities they never had. Dad works 12-hour days so I could go to art school. Mom learned English by watching soap operas so she could help me with homework. Sarah's voice grew soft. They've never seen the ocean, but they helped me move to New York because they believed in my dreams. Have you taken them to see the ocean? Not yet, but I will. When I get my big break, when I'm financially stable enough to take time off. Sarah trailed off, realizing how hollow that sounded. Someday. Ethan opened his eyes and turned to look at her. Why someday? Why not now? Because I can barely afford my own rent, let alone a vacation for 3 people. What if money wasn't an object? But it is an object. It's the biggest object. Sarah sat up, wrapping her arms around her knees. That's the difference between your world and mine, Ethan. You can decide to do something and just do it. I have to plan and save and sacrifice and hope nothing goes wrong in the meantime. That must be exhausting. It is. But it also makes things matter more. You know, when you have to work for something, when you have to choose it over other things you want, it becomes precious. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching a group of kids chase bubbles while their parents laughed and took pictures. What about your family? Sarah asked eventually. What are they like? Ethan's expression grew complicated, successful, driven, demanding. He was quiet for a moment. My father built the company from the ground up. Started with a single construction project and turned it into an empire. He's brilliant, ruthless, and completely consumed by work. And my mother equally brilliant, but in a different way. She manages the social side of our empire. Charity galas, political connections, making sure we maintain the right image. Every interaction is strategic. Do you love them? The question seemed to catch Ethan off guard. Yes. Of course, but I don't know if I like them very much. And I'm not sure they actually know who I am underneath all their expectations. What do you mean? I mean, I've been groomed to take over the company since I was 5 years old. Every school, every activity, every friend was chosen to further that goal. I don't know what I would have chosen for myself if I'd had the option. Sarah studied his profile. What do you think you would have chosen? I don't know. Maybe architecture. I've always been fascinated by buildings, by the way they can make people feel. But that was too close to construction, too blue-collar for the Stonewell air. It's not too late, you know, to figure out what you want. Ethan laughed, but there was no humor in it. I'm 28 years old, Sarah. I have a board of directors, thousands of employees, shareholders who expect certain returns. I can't just decide to become an architect. Why not? Because I have responsibilities, obligations. People depend on me. People depend on architects, too. They just depend on them for different things. Sarah lay back down, turning to face him. You know what I think? What? I think you're scared. Scared of what? Scared of finding out who you are when you're not Ethan Stonewell, heir to billions. Scared of discovering that maybe you're not as special as you've been told your whole life. Ethan was quiet for so long that Sarah wondered if she'd gone too far. Finally, he spoke. What if I'm not special? I mean, what if underneath all the money and the name and the expectations I'm just ordinary? Then you'd be like the rest of us, Sarah said gently, and maybe you'd finally understand why ordinary can be extraordinary. They stayed in the park until the sun started to set, talking about dreams and fears and the weird space between who you are and who you're supposed to be. When they finally made their way back to Manhattan, Ethan was quiet and thoughtful. Thank you, he said as they stood in the lobby of their building. For today, for all of it. Don't thank me yet, Sarah said, pressing the elevator button. We've got 6 more days. And tomorrow we're going to talk about what real work actually feels like. Should I be terrified? Sarah grinned. Absolutely. As the elevator doors closed between them, Sarah caught a glimpse of Ethan's reflection in the polished metal, still devastatingly handsome, but somehow more real in his target clothes, and with his hair mussed from lying on the grass. She was in so much trouble, but for the first time in months, she was also excited to see what tomorrow would bring. Sarah's alarm went off at 5:30 a.m., which was nothing unusual. What was unusual was the text message waiting for her from Ethan, sent at 5:15 a.m. Ready for day 2. What's the plan, coach? She stared at her phone, wondering if billionaire heirs normally woke up before dawn, or if yesterday had actually affected him more than she'd thought. Either way, she had the perfect education planned for him. She texted back, "Meet me in the lobby at 6:30. Dressed like you're going to do actual work. And Ethan, bring gloves." At exactly 6:30, Ethan appeared in the lobby, wearing his new jeans, a gray t-shirt, and work boots that looked suspiciously expensive, but were at least the right style. More importantly, he looked like he'd actually slept, which was more than Sarah could say for herself. She'd spent half the night thinking about their conversation in the park, and the way he'd looked at her when she called him scared. "Where are we going?" he asked, as they walked toward the subway station. "Queens. We're going to spend the day with my cousin Javier. He runs a moving company." Ethan stopped walking. "We're going to move furniture? We're going to do honest work for honest pay, Sarah corrected. Javier's been short-handed this week, and I promised I'd help him out today. Since you want to learn about the real world, you're going to learn what it's like to earn money with your back instead of your brain. The subway ride to Queens was different from the day before. Ethan seemed more comfortable with the crowd, though he still looked around with fascination at the early morning commuters, construction workers, nurses getting off night shifts, office cleaners heading home. These people have been working all night, he observed quietly. Some of them, others are just starting their day. The world doesn't run on bankers' hours, Ethan. Someone has to keep the lights on and the coffee brewing and the streets clean while everyone else is sleeping. They emerged from the subway into a part of Queens that looked nothing like Manhattan's gleaming towers. Here, auto repair shops sat next to family restaurants, and the buildings told stories of decades of hard work and community persistence. Javier's moving company operated out of a converted garage with 2 trucks parked outside, and a hand-painted sign that read, "We move your life with care." Javier himself was waiting for them, a compact man in his 40s with forearms like tree trunks and a smile that could power a small city. Prima. He swept Sarah into a bear hug that lifted her off her feet. "And you must be the rich boy she's been telling me about." "Ethan," he said, extending his hand. Javier looked at it for a moment, then shook it with the kind of grip that tested whether you were serious about working. "Javier Ortiz, hope you're ready to sweat, because we've got 3 moves today, and I'm not paying anyone to stand around looking pretty." The first job was a small apartment in Astoria. A young couple moving from a studio to a 1-bedroom. It seemed simple enough until they reached the 4th-floor walk-up and discovered that some assembly required had been a massive understatement. "Okay, rookie," Javier said, handing Ethan a toolbox. "You're on furniture duty with Sarah. I'll handle the heavy lifting with Diego." Diego turned out to be Javier's 9-year-old nephew, built like a linebacker and possessing the supernatural ability to carry a couch up 4 flights of stairs without breaking a sweat. "Don't feel bad," Sarah whispered to Ethan as they watched Diego effortlessly navigate a dresser around a narrow corner. "He's not entirely human." The apartment was a maze of boxes, disassembled furniture, and 2 very stressed 20-somethings who kept apologizing for the chaos. "It's okay," Sarah assured them. "Everyone's first big move is like this. You'll look back on this and laugh." "Will we?" the girlfriend asked, staring at the pile of IKEA instructions scattered across the floor. "Absolutely. And in 10 years, you'll be helping some other couple figure out which end of an Allen wrench is which." Ethan had been assigned to reassemble a bookshelf, which seemed straightforward until he realized that the instructions were apparently written by someone who had never actually seen a bookshelf. Sarah watched him struggle with the seemingly simple task for about 10 minutes before taking pity on him. "Here," she said, kneeling beside him on the floor. "The trick with IKEA is to ignore the instructions and figure out what the piece is supposed to look like when it's done. That seems counterintuitive. Most of life is counterintuitive. That's what makes it interesting." She showed him how to identify which pieces actually connected to which, her hands guiding his as they sorted through the hardware. "See, the pictures lie, but the physics don't." Working together, they managed to transform the pile of wood and screws into something that actually resembled furniture. Ethan stood back and surveyed their handiwork with the satisfaction of someone who had just summited Everest. "We built that," he said, wonder in his voice. "We did. And it's going to hold someone's books for years. Their kids might read some of those books. That's not nothing, Ethan." The second move was more challenging. An elderly woman relocating from a house she'd lived in for 40 years to a senior community. Mrs. Kim had packed her entire life into boxes, and each one seemed to contain a story she needed to tell. "This was my grandmother's china," she explained to Ethan as he carefully wrapped each piece in newspaper. "She brought it from Korea when she immigrated in 1955. Never used it except for special occasions." "It's beautiful," Ethan said, holding up a delicate teacup painted with cherry blossoms. "Are you taking it with you?" "Oh, yes. My granddaughter will want it someday, even if she doesn't know it yet." "Mrs. Kim smiled. "Young people always think they don't need the old things until they get old enough to understand what they mean." Sarah watched Ethan listen to Mrs. Kim's stories with genuine interest, asking questions about Korea and immigration and what it was like to build a life in a new country. When they loaded the china cabinet into the truck, he took extra care to secure it personally. "She's trusting us with her history," he said to Sarah as they drove to Mrs. Kim's new apartment. "That's what this job really is," Javier called from the driver's seat. "We're not just moving stuff. We're moving people's lives, their memories, their hopes for what comes next. That's why we're careful, even when we're tired." The senior community was nice, clean, well-maintained, with activities and medical care, and all the things Mrs. Kim would need, but Sarah could see the sadness in the older woman's eyes as they carried her possessions into a space that was half the size of her old home. "It's hard, Mrs." Kim said quietly as Ethan reassembled her kitchen table. 40 years in one place, and now everything has to fit into 2 rooms. "But you're taking the important things," Sarah said gently. "The china, the photos, the memories, the stuff that makes a place home. Will it, though, feel like home?" Ethan looked up from the table he was assembling. "My grandmother moved to a retirement community when I was in college," he said. "She was terrified she'd lose herself in a place that was all about getting older. But you know what happened?" "What?" "She became the unofficial social director, started a book club, organized game nights, taught other residents how to use computers to video chat with their grandchildren. She said it was the first time in years she felt useful instead of just old." "Mrs." Kim's face brightened slightly. "There is a pottery class here on Thursdays." "There you go," Ethan said, tightening the last screw on the table. "New place, new possibilities." As they finished setting up Mrs. Kim's apartment, Sarah found herself watching Ethan with new eyes. He wasn't just going through the motions or playing at being normal. He was genuinely connecting with people, finding ways to make their day a little brighter. The third move was the most challenging yet. A family of 5 relocating from a cramped apartment to a slightly less cramped apartment, with 3 young children underfoot, and parents who looked like they hadn't slept in approximately 6 years. "I'm sorry about the chaos," the mother, Rachel, said as they surveyed the apartment that looked like it had been hit by a toy tornado. "We tried to pack everything, but with the kids, don't apologize," Javier said. "We've got kids too. We know how it is." The children ages 3, 5, and 7 treated the move like an adventure, which meant they were simultaneously helpful and completely in the way. The 3-year-old Liam seemed particularly fascinated by Ethan. "Are you a giant?" Liam asked, staring up at Ethan with wide eyes. "No, I'm just tall," Ethan said, crouching down to Liam's level. "Are you a superhero?" "Because you look like you have superpowers." Liam giggled and launched into an elaborate explanation of his various superhero abilities, which apparently included the power to make toys disappear into the couch cushions and the ability to eat exactly half of any meal put in front of him. While Javier and Diego handled the major furniture, Sarah and Ethan were assigned to box up the children's rooms, a task that proved more complex than anyone had anticipated. "How do they have so much stuff?" Ethan whispered as they surveyed the 5-year-old's room, which looked like Toys R Us had exploded. "Kids accumulate things," Sarah explained, carefully packing a collection of stuffed animals. "Every toy has a story. Every book is a favorite. Every craft project is a masterpiece that can't be thrown away." "My childhood room was nothing like this," Ethan said, wrapping a dollhouse in bubble wrap. "Everything had its place. Everything was educational or appropriate for my station in life." "What did you play with?" "Educational toys, chess sets, books about history and business." Ethan held up a battered teddy bear. "Nothing like this. That's Mr. Cuddles," 5-year-old Sophie announced, appearing in the doorway. "He's very important." "I can see that," Ethan said seriously. "He looks like a bear who's been on many adventures. He came with me to the doctor when I got my shots, and he sleeps with me every night. And one time he fell in the toilet, but Mommy washed him, and he was okay." Ethan carefully wrapped Mr. Cuddles in soft tissue paper. "Well, we'll make sure he gets to your new room safely. A bear this important deserves special treatment." Sophie beamed and skipped away, satisfied that her beloved toy was in good hands. "You're good with kids," Sarah observed. "I've never really been around them, but they're honest. They say what they think and feel what they feel without calculating the social or financial implications. Must be refreshing." "It is. Actually, the move to the new apartment involved 3 trips up, 2 flights of stairs, with the children helping by carrying small boxes and providing running commentary on everything happening around them. By the time they were loading the last truck, everyone was exhausted, sweaty, and covered in a fine layer of dust and cardboard fuzz. "How much do we owe you?" Rachel asked Javier as they finished setting up the beds in the new place. Javier quoted a price that made Sarah wince. It was fair, but she could see the family calculating whether they could afford it. "Actually," Ethan said, pulling Javier aside, "I'd like to cover today's moves, all 3 of them." Javier frowned. "That's not how this works, rich boy. People pay for honest work with honest money." "Then consider it an investment in my education," Ethan said. "I learned more today than I have in most college courses." Mrs. Kim shared her family history with us. This family trusted us with their children's treasures, and the couple this morning let us be part of their first step toward building a life together. That's worth more than money. You're missing the point, Javier said. It's not about charity. It's about people earning what they get and getting what they earn. Ethan was quiet for a moment, then nodded. You're right. But what if I hire your company for a job? A real job that pays real money. What kind of job? I have a penthouse full of furniture I never use. Art I never look at. Things that are just taking up space. What if you help me figure out what I actually need and donate the rest to families who could use it? Javier studied Ethan's face. You serious about this? Dead serious. And I'll pay your full rate. Deal, but I get to decide what you actually need. Not you. Fair enough. They shook hands, and Sarah felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't the spoiled prince she'd yelled at 3 days ago. This was someone who was actually listening, actually learning. The ride back to Manhattan was quieter than the morning trip. All four of them were tired, dirty, and satisfied in the way that comes from hard work. Well done. Ethan stared out the window, watching Queens give way to Manhattan, and Sarah could practically see him processing everything he'd experienced. Penny, for your thoughts, she said quietly. I keep thinking about Mrs. Kim's china, Ethan said, how her grandmother carried it across an ocean, how Mrs. Kim saved it for special occasions that barely ever came, how she's hoping her granddaughter will want it someday. What about it? I have a set of china that's been in my family for 4 generations, probably worth more than Mrs. Kim's house. I've never eaten off it, never even touched it. Sits in a climate-controlled cabinet because it's too valuable to use. Maybe that's the problem. What do you mean? Maybe things are only valuable if they're actually valued, if they're used and loved and shared instead of just preserved. Ethan was quiet until they reached their building. As they stood in the lobby, both covered in dust and exhaustion, he turned to face her. I want to show you something, he said. Tomorrow, something I've never shown anyone. What is it? A secret. My secret. He pressed the elevator button for the penthouse. But first, I need to ask you something. Today, when we were working, I felt useful. Actually useful, not just ornamental. Is that what it's like for you at your job? Sarah thought about Michael Carter and his corporate-friendly campaigns, about having to drain the soul out of her work to make it professional. Sometimes, she said honestly, when I'm doing my own projects, my freelance work. Yes, at Carter & Associates, not so much. Why do you stay? Because I need the steady paycheck. Because freelance work doesn't come with health insurance or guaranteed income. Because sometimes you have to compromise your dreams to pay your rent. What if you didn't have to choose? The elevator arrived before Sarah could ask what he meant, and they rode up in thoughtful silence. As the doors opened on her floor, Ethan caught her hand. Thank you, he said, for today, for letting me be part of something real. Thank you for actually showing up, for listening to Mrs. Kim, and playing with the kids, and understanding that Javier's work matters. It does matter. All of it matters. Ethan's amber eyes were serious. I'm starting to understand why you were so angry that first night. It wasn't just about the noise, was it? No, Sarah said softly. It was about respect, about recognizing that other people's lives and needs are just as important as your own. I'm learning that, slowly, but I'm learning. As the elevator doors closed between them, Sarah realized that somewhere between Target and Mrs. Kim's china cabinet, she'd stopped thinking of Ethan as a project to be fixed and started thinking of him as, well, as someone she was genuinely starting to care about, which was a problem, because in 4 days, their deal would be over, and he'd go back to his billionaire life while she went back to her corporate soul-crushing job. But for now, she was too tired to worry about the future. Tomorrow, he wanted to show her a secret. She just hoped it wouldn't be the kind of secret that reminded her exactly how different their worlds really were. Meanwhile, in the penthouse, Ethan stood in his marble foyer, still in his work clothes, looking around at the pristine perfection of his home with new eyes. Everything was beautiful, expensive, and completely sterile. Not a single item out of place, not a single thing that told the story of who actually lived here. He thought about Mrs. Kim's apartment, cluttered with memories and meaning, about the young couple's chaos that spoke of a life being built together, and about the family with their children's artwork on the refrigerator, and toys scattered like promises of laughter to come. His penthouse looked like a museum exhibit. How the Other Half Lives, circa 2025. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to a contact he hadn't called in months. Elaine. It's Ethan. Yes, I know it's late, I need a favor. A big one. Remember that architecture firm you mentioned? The one that specializes in sustainable, community-focused design? I want to meet with them tomorrow if possible. No, this isn't for the company. This is personal. After he hung up, Ethan walked to his floor-to-ceiling windows and looked out at the city sprawling below him. Somewhere down there, Sarah was probably reviewing her day, thinking about tomorrow's plans, working on her freelance projects that actually meant something to people. Tomorrow, he was going to show her the one place in his world that felt real, the one secret he'd kept even from his family. And then he was going to tell her about the plan that had been forming in his mind all day, a plan that could change both of their lives if she was brave enough to trust him, and if he was brave enough to risk everything his family had built on the chance that there was something more important than money and power and maintaining the status quo. For the first time in his life, Ethan Stonewell was about to bet on his heart instead of his head. He just hoped it wouldn't destroy them both. Back in apartment 15B, Sarah stood in her tiny shower, letting the hot water wash away the dust and sweat of the day. But she couldn't wash away the memory of Ethan's hands guiding hers as they assembled furniture, or the way he'd listened to Mrs. Kim's stories, or how natural he'd looked playing with Liam and Sophie. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "How's Operation Humanize the Billionaire going?" Sarah stared at the message for a long time before responding. "I think I'm in trouble. Good trouble or bad trouble? The worst kind. I think I actually like him. As in like. Or like as in you don't want to murder him anymore. As in I think he might actually be a good person underneath all the money and privilege. Sarah, babe, that's not trouble. That's progress. It's trouble if I'm falling for someone whose world I'll never fit into. Who says you have to fit into his world? Maybe he fits into yours. People like Ethan Stonewell don't fit into worlds like mine, Emily. They visit them. They study them. They might even enjoy them for a while. But they don't stay. You don't know that, don't I? In 4 days, this experiment ends, and he goes back to being heir to billions, while I go back to making corporate campaigns for ungrateful clients. Or, Emily texted back, something completely different happens that neither of you saw coming. Sarah wanted to believe that she really did, but she'd learned long ago that fairy tales were for people who could afford to believe in happy endings. Real life was messier, more complicated, and far less forgiving to girls who fell for princes. Even princes who looked good in Target clothes and weren't afraid to get their hands dirty moving furniture. Tomorrow, he wanted to show her a secret. She just hoped it wouldn't be the kind of secret that shattered the fragile connection they'd been building. One honest conversation at a time. Sarah woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages, which was either a very good sign or the beginning of the apocalypse. Given her recent luck, she was betting on apocalypse. The calls were from her boss, Michael Carter, and they'd started at 6 a.m. The texts were from Emily, growing increasingly frantic. "Check the news, Sarah. Check the news. Why aren't you answering? Oh my God. Your penthouse prince is on the front page of the Times. Call me back." With growing dread, Sarah grabbed her laptop and pulled up the New York Times website. The headline hit her like a physical blow. "Stonewell heir, spotted working for moving company. Is this a PR stunt or personal crisis?" Below the headline was a series of photos that made her stomach drop to her feet. Ethan loading furniture into Javier's truck. Ethan carrying boxes upstairs. Ethan kneeling on the floor of Mrs. Kim's apartment carefully wrapping her grandmother's china, and in several of the photos, clearly visible beside him, was Sarah. The article was a masterpiece of speculative journalism, painting Ethan as either having a mental breakdown or staging an elaborate publicity stunt. It mentioned his mysterious female companion and speculated about whether the Stonewell family was aware of their heir's unusual activities. Her phone rang. Michael Carter. "Lopez." His voice was so loud, she had to hold the phone away from her ear. "Get down to the office now. Michael, I can explain. You can explain why you've been secretly dating one of the richest men in America and didn't think to mention it. You can explain why my employee is splashed across the front page of the business section, looking like she's playing house with a billionaire. It's not what it looks like. It looks like you've been holding out on us. Lopez, how long have you been seeing him? What's he promised you? And more importantly, what can he do for this firm?" Sarah closed her eyes. Of course, this would be Michael's first thought. "I'll be there in an hour," she said, and hung up before he could launch into another interrogation. She was still staring at the photos when her buzzer rang. Ethan's voice crackled through the intercom. "Sarah, can you let me up? We need to talk." When she opened her door, Ethan looked like he hadn't slept. His hair was disheveled. He was still wearing yesterday's jeans, and his face was drawn with exhaustion and something that looked like panic. "You saw the article," he said. "Kind of hard to miss. It's the top story on 3 different news sites." Sarah stepped aside to let him in, then closed the door and leaned against it. "How did they even know where we were?" "Someone tipped them off. Probably someone at one of the buildings we moved yesterday." Ethan ran his hands through his hair. "Zara, I am so sorry. I never thought I should have considered that this might happen. Should have considered that hanging out with normal people might be newsworthy? Yeah, that's definitely something you should have factored in." Sarah's voice was sharper than she intended, but she was scared and angry and feeling completely out of her depth. "I know you're angry." "I'm not angry, Ethan. I'm terrified." She showed him her phone, which was now showing 57 missed calls. "My boss is furious. There are reporters calling me, and according to Twitter, I'm either a gold digger or a social media influencer trying to boost my profile." Ethan's face went pale. "What do you want me to do?" "I can make a statement. Clarify that this was just what? A rich guy playing at being normal for a few days? A billionaire slumming it with the poor girl for entertainment?" Sarah's voice broke slightly, "Because that's sure what it looks like from here." They stared at each other across her tiny living room, and Sarah could see the moment when Ethan realized how completely he'd miscalculated the situation. "I need to go," she said, grabbing her jacket. "I have to deal with my boss and figure out how to salvage my career before this gets worse." "Sarah, wait. No. Ethan, just no. This is exactly what I was afraid would happen. Your world and my world don't mix. They crash into each other, and people like me get hurt." She left him standing in her apartment and headed for what she was certain would be the worst day of her professional life. Carter and Associates, 10:30 a.m. Michael Carter's office felt like a tribunal. He sat behind his massive desk like a judge, while Sarah faced him from the defendant's chair. The newspaper was spread between them like evidence of her crimes. "So," Michael began, his voice deceptively calm, "Ethan Stonewell, heir to a $1-2 billion fortune, and you've been what? Dating him? Playing house? Conducting some kind of social experiment?" "It's complicated," Sarah said, which was both true and completely inadequate. "Uncomplicated, because from where I'm sitting, it looks like my employee has been secretly involved with one of the most powerful men in America and didn't think to share that information with her employer. Because it's personal, Michael, my personal life is none of the company's business. It becomes the company's business when it ends up on the front page of the Times." Michael leaned forward. "Do you have any idea what a contract with Stonewell Enterprises could mean for this firm? We're talking about tens of millions of dollars in revenue. I'm not going to pimp out my personal relationships for corporate gain." "Pimp out, Lopez. I'm talking about networking. About using the connections you have to benefit everyone here. Isn't that what you want? Success, advancement, the chance to work on bigger, more important projects." Sarah stared at him. "At what cost? What cost? You're already involved with the man. I'm just suggesting you make the most of it. And if I refuse?" Michael's smile was cold. "Well, that would be disappointing, especially considering how competitive the design industry is these days. How difficult it can be to find new opportunities if you develop a reputation for being uncooperative." The threat was crystal clear. Sarah felt something die inside her chest, the last vestige of respect she'd had for her job, her boss, her entire professional situation. "I see," she said quietly. "I knew you'd understand. Now, why don't you call your boyfriend and set up a meeting? Nothing too aggressive, just a casual conversation about his company's creative needs." Sarah stood up slowly. "Michael?" "Yes?" "Go to heck." She walked out of his office, past the staring faces of her co-workers, past Emily's worried expression, and straight to her desk. She opened her laptop, pulled up her resignation letter template, and began typing. 20 minutes later, she hit send on an email that ended her career at Carter and Associates, and quite possibly her career in New York altogether. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ethan. "Please let me explain. Meet me at the place I wanted to show you yesterday. The address is 47 West 13th Street, basement level." Sarah stared at the message for a long time. Every rational part of her brain said to ignore it, to go home, pack her things, and start planning her move back to Texas. But there was a small, stubborn part of her that wanted to know what his secret was. what he'd been so eager to share before their worlds exploded into headlines and speculation. Against her better judgment, she got on the subway, 47 West 13th Street. The address led to an unremarkable building in the village, the kind of place you'd walk past 100 times without noticing. Sarah found the basement entrance and knocked. Not sure what to expect, Ethan opened the door, and she immediately knew this place was different. Gone was the polished prince, the put-together air. He looked raw, vulnerable, almost nervous. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "I wasn't sure you would. I'm not sure why I did." He led her down a narrow hallway and through a door marked private, and Sarah found herself in the most beautiful workshop she'd ever seen. The space was huge, clearly a converted basement with exposed brick walls and industrial lighting, but what took her breath away were the models, architectural models covering every surface, each one more intricate and stunning than the last. "What is this place?" she whispered. "My secret," Ethan said, his voice soft. "I've been renting this space for 3 years, working on designs, building models, teaching myself everything I should have learned in architecture school." Sarah moved through the space like she was in a museum, examining each model with growing amazement. They weren't the cold corporate structures she associated with Stonewell Enterprises. These were warm, human buildings designed for communities, affordable housing with gardens, community centers with flexible spaces, mixed-use developments that brought together working families and small businesses. "Ethan, these are incredible," she breathed, stopping in front of a model of what looked like an entire neighborhood. "This one especially. It's like a complete community." "That's East Harlem," he said, coming to stand beside her. "I've been working on a proposal for affordable housing that doesn't look like a housing project. Mixed income, sustainable, designed to bring people together instead of isolating them. Have you shown this to your family, to your company?" Ethan laughed, but there was no humor in it. "My father would have a stroke. This isn't profitable enough, prestigious enough, corporate enough for Stonewell Enterprises. We build luxury high-rises and commercial complexes, not community centers for working families." "Then why do you keep designing them?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, running his finger along the edge of the model. "Because I keep thinking about Mrs. Lon, Kim, about that family with 3 kids trying to find a place they can afford, about your parents working 2 jobs each just to survive. The buildings I design for Stonewell don't solve problems. They just create more expensive ways to live." Sarah studied his profile. "So why don't you change that?" "Because I'm one person against an entire board of directors, shareholders, and a family legacy that's been building the same kinds of projects for 50 years. What if you weren't alone?" Ethan turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" Sarah took a deep breath, the pieces of an impossible idea falling together in her mind. "What if you had a partner, someone who understood community needs, who could help you design buildings that actually serve the people who live in them? You have the resources, the connections, the business knowledge. I have the community connections, the understanding of what working families actually need, the design skills to make it beautiful and functional." She gestured around the workshop. "This place proves you're serious about this. These models prove you have the vision. It's not that simple." "Why not? Why does it have to be complicated?" Sarah's voice grew stronger as the idea took shape. "Start small. Find a project. Prove the concept works. Build from there. Show your family and your board that community-focused development can be profitable and sustainable. And you'd be willing to do this with me, even after today, after the headlines and the mess I've made of your life?" Sarah looked around the workshop again, at the dreams made tangible in wood and cardboard, at the evidence of Ethan's genuine desire to use his privilege for something meaningful. "I quit my job today," she said quietly. "What?" "Michael wanted me to use our whatever this is to get him a contract with Stonewell Enterprises. When I refused, he basically threatened my career." Sarah shrugged. "So, I quit, sent my resignation letter, and walked out." "Sarah, I'm so sorry." "Don't be. You did me a favor. That job was killing my soul. Anyway, Michael was right about one thing, though. I do want to work on bigger, more important projects. Projects that matter." She picked up a small model of a community center, admiring the way the design incorporated natural light and flexible spaces. "But I want to do it right, with someone who understands that buildings aren't just structures. They're places where people live their lives, raise their children, build their dreams." Ethan was staring at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "You're serious about this?" "Dead serious. But I have conditions." "Name them." "Equal partnership, not you funding my designs. Not me decorating your buildings. Real partnership, where we both have equal say in every decision. Done. We start small. Prove the concept before we try to change the world. Agreed. And we do this right. No cutting corners. No compromising on quality or community input because it's easier or cheaper. Of course, Sarah set down the model and turned to face him fully. And no more secrets. If we're going to be partners, I need to know that you're committed to this. Not just playing at it until you get bored. I'm committed, Ethan said, and the intensity in his voice made her believe him. These models, this workshop, I've been working on this for 3 years. Sarah, long before I met you, you didn't give me the idea. You gave me the courage to actually pursue it. What do you mean? I mean, watching you fight for your art. Seeing you work 2 jobs to support your dreams. Learning what it means to actually care about something more than profit margins, it made me realize I've been hiding from what I really want because I was afraid of disappointing my family. And now I'm more afraid of disappointing myself, of wasting the opportunities I have because I was too scared to take risks. They stood in the workshop, surrounded by dreams made manifest, and Sarah felt something shift in her chest. This wasn't the spoiled prince from the penthouse anymore. This was someone who had found his purpose and was brave enough to pursue it. There's something else, Ethan said quietly. Something I need to tell you before we go any further. Sarah's heart clenched. What? I'm in love with you. The words hung in the air between them, raw and honest and terrifying. Ethan, I know the timing is terrible. I know everything is complicated and messy, and we're probably both crazy for even considering this partnership. But I needed you to know. He stepped closer. I've spent my entire life surrounded by people who wanted something from me. My money, my name, my connections. You're the first person who made me want to be better, just because you believed I could be. You can't love me, Sarah said weakly. You barely know me. I know you gave up your Saturday to show a spoiled rich boy what real life looks like. I know you defended Mrs. Kim's china like it was priceless art. I know you quit your job rather than compromise your principles. I know you see possibility where other people see problems. Those are just things I did. Those are who you are. Ethan reached up to touch her face gently. And who you are is someone I want to spend the rest of my life learning about. Sarah closed her eyes, leaning into his touch despite every rational thought in her head. This is crazy. Completely crazy. We're from completely different worlds, so we'll build a new one together. Your family will hate me. Then they'll have to get used to disappointment. The media will tear us apart. Let them try. Sarah opened her eyes and found herself drowning in amber. What if we fail? What if the partnership doesn't work? What if we can't make the business sustainable? What if? Ethan silenced her with a kiss that tasted like possibility and felt like coming home. When they broke apart, both of them were breathing hard. What if we succeed? He whispered against her lips. What if we build something beautiful together? What if we prove that love and business and changing the world can all coexist? Is that what you think we're doing? Changing the world? I think we're changing our worlds. And maybe, if we're very lucky and very careful and very brave, we'll change a few other people's worlds along the way. Sarah looked around the workshop one more time, at the evidence of dreams taking shape, at the proof that sometimes fairy tales could be built from blueprint paper and hope. Okay, she said. Okay. Let's be partners. Let's build beautiful buildings for real people. Let's prove that community-focused development can work. She smiled. And let's see what happens when a girl from Texas and a prince from Manhattan decide to write their own ending. Ethan's answering smile was brighter than all the lights in his penthouse. Deal, he said, and kissed her again. 6 months later, the grand opening of the East Harlem Community Center was nothing like the typical Stonewell Enterprises ribbon-cutting ceremony. There were no politicians or society photographers, no champagne or designer canopies. Instead, there were families from the neighborhood, kids running around the new playground, seniors checking out the computer lab, and teenagers already claiming territory in the teen center. Sarah stood with Ethan and Javier, who had become their go-to contractor for community projects, watching Mrs. Kim teach a pottery class in the arts and crafts room. Look at that, Javier said, grinning. She's got half the neighborhood in there making ashtrays. They're not ashtrays, Sarah corrected. They're functional art pieces. Same thing. The project had been their pilot. A community center built in partnership with local residents, designed to meet actual community needs rather than architectural firm fantasies. It had taken 6 months, 3 public hearings, countless community input sessions, and more coffee than any human should consume in a lifetime. it had also been profitable. "The Times wants to do a follow-up story," Ethan said, showing Sarah his phone, "about the success of community-centered development. Are you going to do it?" "Only if you do it with me. We're partners. Remember? 6 months ago, the word partners had applied only to their business relationship, but somewhere between community meetings and late-night design sessions and learning to navigate the media attention that came with dating a Stonewell, it had expanded to include everything else." Speaking of partners, Emily appeared beside them, grinning like she'd won the lottery. "I have news. Good news or bad news?" Sarah asked. "The best news, Michael Carter's firm just lost the Thompson account. Apparently, the client decided they wanted authentic, community-focused design instead of soulless corporate aesthetics." Emily's grin widened. "Guess who they hired instead?" Sarah and Ethan exchanged glances. Their firm, Stonewell and Lopez Community Design, had been getting a lot of calls lately from clients who wanted something different from the usual corporate approach. "We're going to need more staff," Ethan said. "Already on it," Sarah replied. "I put out feelers to some of my old classmates from Parsons. Turns out a lot of talented designers are tired of making rich people's houses bigger." A group of kids ran past, chasing a soccer ball toward the new field behind the center. One of them, Liam, the 3-year-old from the moving job, spotted Ethan and ran over. Mr. Ethan, come see what I made in pottery class." Ethan allowed himself to be dragged away by a tiny hand, and Sarah watched him go with a smile that felt like sunshine. "You know," Emily said thoughtfully, 6 months ago, if someone had told me you'd end up in a relationship with a billionaire, running a successful business, and genuinely happy, I would have suggested therapy, and now I'm thinking about asking Javier if he has any single cousins." "Emily, what? You can't be the only one who gets a fairy tale ending." Sarah laughed, but her attention was caught by a familiar figure approaching. A woman in an elegant suit who looked distinctly out of place among the community center's opening day crowd. "Ms. Lopez." The woman extended a perfectly manicured hand. "I'm Elaine Stonewell, Ethan's mother." Sarah's stomach dropped. She'd been dreading this meeting for months. Despite Ethan's assurances that his family would come around eventually, "Mrs. Stonewell, it's nice to meet you. I wanted to see this project for myself," Elaine said, looking around the bustling community center, "to understand what has captured my son's attention so completely. And what do you think?" Elaine was quiet for a moment, watching a group of teenagers collaborate on a mural in the main hallway. "I think," she said finally, "that I haven't seen Ethan this passionate about anything since he was 8 years old, and decided he was going to design a treehouse that could house every stray cat in Manhattan. Did he succeed?" He drew up incredibly detailed plans and presented them to the city planning office. Elaine's smile was fond. They were very polite about explaining zoning laws to an 8-year-old. "Some things never change." "No, they don't. He's always wanted to build things that matter. I think we just forgot to listen to what mattered to him." They stood in comfortable silence, watching Ethan emerge from the pottery room, covered in clay and grinning like he'd discovered buried treasure. "Ms. Lopez," Elaine said quietly, "I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For assuming you were just another young woman interested in my son's fortune, for not recognizing that you were exactly what he needed. Someone who saw his potential instead of his portfolio." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. "Mrs. Stonewell, Elaine, please, we're going to be family after all." "Are we?" Elaine gestured toward Ethan, who was now helping Liam wash clay off his hands while explaining the basics of ceramic firing to a fascinated audience of 6-year-olds. "Look at him," she said softly. "I haven't seen him this happy, this himself, since he was a child. Whatever you've done, whatever you've shown him, it's brought back the son I thought I'd lost to boardrooms and expectations. He brought himself back. I just provided some encouragement. Don't diminish what you've done." The Ethan, who threw parties to avoid thinking about his life, wouldn't have conceived of this place, wouldn't have fought the board to fund it, wouldn't have spent 6 months listening to community input and revising designs. Elaine's voice grew warm. "You didn't just save my son from a life he didn't want. You helped him build the life he did want." Before Sarah could respond, Ethan appeared beside them, having escaped from his tiny fan club. "Mom," he said, surprise and wariness in his voice. "I didn't expect to see you here. I wanted to see what you've been working on." Elaine looked around the center one more time. "It's remarkable, Ethan. Truly remarkable. It's just the beginning," Ethan said, unconsciously reaching for Sarah's hand. "We have plans for affordable housing, mixed-use developments, community-centered design projects across the city, and the board is supportive. The board is learning to be supportive. Profitability helps with that. Elaine laughed. It always does. Well, I should let you get back to your opening celebration, but Ethan, your father and I would like to have dinner with you and Sarah next week, if you're free. You want to have dinner with us? I want to get to know the woman who made my son remember who he wanted to be when he grew up. After Elaine left, Ethan turned to Sarah with amazement written across his face. That went better than expected, Sarah observed. That went better than I dared to hope. Ethan squeezed her hand. Ready for the official dedication? The dedication ceremony was simple. Just Ethan and Sarah standing in front of the community center with a crowd of neighbors, kids, and seniors who had made the project their own. Instead of a ribbon, they cut through a paper chain made by the after-school program, each link decorated with drawings of what the center meant to different people. 6 months ago, Ethan said to the crowd, I thought I knew what successful development looked like. It looked like tall buildings, expensive materials, and profit margins that impressed shareholders. He glanced at Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. But I learned something from this community, from the people who live here and work here and raise their families here. I learned that real success isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in lives improved, communities strengthened, and dreams made possible. The crowd applauded, and Mrs. Reckitt, Kim shouted, Tell them about the pottery room. Everyone laughed, and Ethan's prepared speech dissolved into an impromptu conversation about favorite features of the center, upcoming programs, and suggestions for future projects. Later, as the sun set and the opening celebration wound down, Sarah and Ethan found themselves alone in the center, surrounded by the comfortable chaos of a space that was already well-loved. Tired? Ethan asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Exhausted, happy, terrified about what comes next, Sarah leaned back against his chest. The usual. What comes next is we go home, order pizza, and spend tomorrow morning fielding calls from communities that want their own centers. Is that your professional opinion, Mr. Stonewell? That's my professional opinion. Ms. Lopez, though I do have one more item of business to discuss. Oh? Ethan turned her around to face him, and Sarah's heart stopped when she saw the small velvet box in his hand. Ethan Stonewell, what are you doing? Something I've been planning since our 3rd day of partnership, when you yelled at me for trying to buy imported tile when the local supplier had perfectly good options. That's a very specific moment to fall in love. It was the moment I realized you weren't just teaching me about community, you were teaching me about building a life that mattered. Ethan dropped to one knee right there in the middle of the community center they'd built together. Sarah Lopez, will you marry me? Will you be my partner in everything, business, life, changing the world one building at a time? Sarah looked down at him, this man who had started as an arrogant prince and become someone who would propose in a community center surrounded by children's artwork and the lingering smell of pottery clay. Yes, she said, and her voice only shook a little. Yes, I'll marry you. But Ethan, yes? Next time you want to propose, maybe warn a girl so she can fix her hair. Ethan stood up and slipped the ring onto her finger, a simple, elegant band with a stone that caught the light like captured sunshine. Your hair is perfect, he said, kissing her softly. Everything about this is perfect. As they stood in their community center, surrounded by evidence of what was possible when privilege met purpose and love met ambition, Sarah realized that fairy tales weren't about princes rescuing princesses after all. They were about 2 imperfect people deciding to build something beautiful together, one honest conversation at a time. And if that wasn't a happy ending, it was definitely a perfect beginning. Epilogue. 1 year later, the wedding was held in Prospect Park, in the same spot where Ethan had first told Sarah about his family, and she had challenged him to figure out what he really wanted. It was small, intimate, and completely perfect, a mixture of Sarah's Texas family, Ethan's East Coast relatives, and the community they'd built together in New York. Javier walked Sarah down the aisle, since her father was stuck in immigration paperwork that wouldn't be resolved for another 6 months. Mrs. Kim did the reading, a poem about building homes that shelter not just bodies, but dreams. Liam and Sophie served as ring bearer and flower girl, respectively, and managed to complete their duties without any major disasters. The reception was held at the East Harlem Community Center, because, of course, it was. Elaine Stonewell danced with Javier while debating the finer points of sustainable development. Emily caught the bouquet and immediately handed it to Diego, who blushed furiously and mumbled something about not being ready for that kind of pressure. Sarah's parents, who had finally received their visas, spent the evening being completely charmed by everyone they met, and declaring that their daughter had found herself a good man who understood the value of hard work, not bad for a rich boy. Her father told Ethan during the father-daughter dance he'd insisted on having with his new son-in-law. "I had a good teacher," Ethan replied, spinning Sarah's mother with surprising grace. At the end of the night, as they cleaned up paper plates and folded tables, Sarah found Ethan sitting on the front steps of the community center, still in his tuxedo, but with his bow tie undone and his sleeves rolled up. "No regrets?" she asked, settling beside him. "About marrying you?" "Never." Ethan pulled her close. "About having our reception in a community center instead of the plaza?" "Also, never. Your mother seemed to survive the trauma. My mother spent half the evening asking Mrs. Kim for her pottery teacher's contact information. I think she's planning to take classes." They sat in comfortable silence, looking out at the neighborhood that had become theirs, not because they owned it, but because they belonged to it. "What are you thinking about?" Sarah asked. "The drawings. The ones you showed me from when you were 8, your dream apartment for your mother." Ethan turned to look at her. "We should do that." "Do what?" "Design dream homes. Not just community centers and affordable housing, but actual dream homes for people who never thought they could afford one." Sarah's eyes widened. "Ethan, that's brilliant. It's your idea. I'm just stealing it. It's our idea. That's what partners do. They steal each other's best ideas and make them better. So, we're really going to do this? Build a company that designs dream homes for working families?" "We're already doing it," Sarah said, gesturing toward the community center. "We're just going to do more of it. I love you, Sarah Stonewell." "I love you too, Ethan Lopez Stonewell." "Is that really going to be my name?" "It is if you want equal billing in the company directory." Ethan laughed and kissed his wife under the streetlights of East Harlem, surrounded by the dreams they'd built together and the ones they were still planning to build. It wasn't the ending either of them had